what needs an artist, or what you see in or hear in an artist that can inspire you to produce them, to work with them?
It's just surreal being on the opposite end, like growing up being that dude, to be like, man, I want to do that. And now, and looking up to all my heroes, and now people consider me their heroes. It's just it's very humbling. I would say I've been doing this for a long time, and I feel like my ear, is I'm still learning, I'm still growing, and I can still learn, how to take what I'm doing to the next level. But from where I'm at right now, for me to even entice working with an artist for certain things, I have to connect with them. Like the spirit, what they doing has to connect with, the energy.
Este es el podcast de Ruidosa Caracola con Eric Mujica.
Episodio número 1 de la temporada número 6 del podcast de Ruidosa Caracola. Y para iniciar les voy a pedir que saquen su diccionario en inglés y español, porque nos vamos a Nashville, en Tennessee, en Estados Unidos, donde vamos a conversar con el ganador de 2 Grammys, también baterista que ha participado con nada más y nada menos que con Gloria Gaynor, Jack White, Rock and Bone Man, Nas y una cantidad de artistas más. También ha aparecido en el show de Jools Holland en Gran Bretaña. Todos conocemos ese maravilloso show que en realidad es una locura solo de imaginar eso, un sueño. También ha estado en el Austin City Limits, también ha participado en Saturday Night Live en una de las presentaciones maravillosas que también tuvo con Jack White. Y hablando de Jack White, acaba de terminar una gira con él durante todo el 2022. Acaba de llegar a su hogar, está en su casa y empezamos a hablar en inglés. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Daru Jones. Welcome Daru Jones to del podcast de Ruidosa Caracola.
How you doing, brother Eric? Thanks for having me on your show.
It's been a pleasure, and thank you for that. It was, I think, November that I saw you here in the Primavera Sound with Jack, and it is quite an experience to see you live.
Oh man, thank you. It was such a pleasure to meet you, and I love being over there. So I was just happy to be out of the house.
It's such a great. It's been many reviews about your playing, and now that sound of that you define a generation right now. Do you think that you're playing the surroundings of the musical surroundings that you have in the last years, it's been great for your musicality, for your profession, for your career, and defining a generation of drummers?
Yes. I mean, I was just grateful to be out and be on the road, because as you know, we were in the pandemic, so we were indoors. Some of us still work. I still did some session work, but it was just good to be outside and touring with Jack again, because, this was like my 10-year anniversary working with him. I recorded all the solo projects, and I didn't do the last tour that he did for the last record, but it was just great to reunite with him and be a part of this tour. I was very excited, and I'm always excited to cross the seas, because I feel like the fans over there, they really appreciate what we do, and yeah, it was just great to be on some different turfs. I think we've traveled to 30 plus countries within a year. So yeah, and it's been great for my career too, just to reunite with Jack, because playing in the hip hop circuit for over a decade, and then graduating or elevating from that to rock and roll and joining that community, it was big for my career. And every time I join Jack, it's always an experience, and it's always an elevation, of a new audience of people that can get exposed to what I do. And it's been a blessing. It's been a blessing. It's been a blessing. Yeah.
Let's go back to many years to that 4-year-old Daru playing drums in a a church, and how much a church or that surroundings influence on 2 days, Daru?
Yeah, I can definitely say my gospel roots is a part of my style. Growing up playing in church, you just learn how to play with the spirit and play from inside. It's like, worship, and you use your instrument, to worship the Creator. So it's all about giving your best. So, that's one of the things that I learned in church, and I bring that in every situation that I'm in, every genre. And just starting, at the age of 4, my mom and dad, they're both musicians. My dad was my mom's organ teacher, and so I would go to church and I would watch my cousins and uncles play, and it was just something about the drums, like all those different sounds, and it being such a loud instrument, it caught my eye. And I could definitely just say that any genre that I play, I try to bring that church element, just playing from the heart and soul, and letting the Creator, a lot of Creator, which I'm a believer, God and Jesus Christ. So, I definitely believe it's another energy that I'm channeling from above. And I just try to, let that energy come and show God's love, through and be a vessel, through what I'm playing on stage and off stage.
Also, playing in church, being involved also in the gospel music, as we all know, that comes from the church. Not is just the feel, but it's just knowing that you're playing, knowing your instrument, dedicate time, dedicate passion, and how much did you take time to learning the drums? How do you learn the drums? Why the drums?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I started at 4, I started playing by ear. I didn't learn how to chart read until I got in high school. My mom, she wanted me to advance, to be able to do that. So she put me in chart reading lessons for 1 year. And I still can't remember all of those things. But anyway, just learning how to play by ear. And at that time, it was no YouTube. It was just all about being able to play what you heard. So, whether it was on cassette tape or vinyl record, just being able to, listen to it. And at that time, the gospel music was not as choppy or technical as it is now. Nowadays, it's more fusion gospel. It's a lot more notes. Back in the days, it was just about playing this pocket and playing it like dance music. Like when you hear the house music and it's that constant, that's the same type of vibe. When I grew up, that was what the church, that was the vibe. We was playing this consistent pattern, just for people to dance and worship music. They still do it now, but it's just a lot more music, instrumentation. It's like a more production. But back in the days, it was just that playing out those raw, loops, for people to dance and get out of themselves and open themselves to let the Spirit come in. So the church that I went to, we had church every night of the week except Saturdays. So I got a chance to watch, my cousins and uncles play. And I remember I was so short, I had to use a little school bench to sit on because I was really short at 4. But I remember I was another cousin that started at the same time. And he had one of those CB700 kid drum sets. And we used to have that kit set up on the other side of the church. And then we would just play along. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just making noise. But, eventually, a couple years later, even like later before I got 10, I remember people saying that I had a good memory. Like I could hear something one time. I had a photographic memory, so I could hear something and play it. And the drummers that admired me at the time, he was a drummer from Detroit, Michigan named Dana Davis, played in a group called Commission, and he played with a lot of different choirs and a group called Witness. And there was another drummer named Michael Williams from Detroit, Michigan. He played in a group called Commission, which is the group with Fred Hammond. And those drummers, they had this pocket meaning that just repetitious grooves, not really going too crazy, just playing these pockets where it's like, if you think of like Clyde Stubblefield and Jabo that played with James Brown, they were playing those songs that were like sometimes more than 6 minutes, but they played those constant pattern loops. And every time you hit that one, you felt it. It was like a live MPC player, you know what I'm saying? So I remember the drummers that I admired at the time, Danny Davis, they all had this cool pocket. They had a little flash. They would do some fills every now and again, but it was at that time, it was all about playing pocket. So I remember just having that reputation of people being like, yo, he could play anything that he hear. And that was until I got exposed to jazz. When I got exposed to the jazz drummers, it was a lot more notes, and it was all about the musicians being showcased versus the band backing up a choir or a vocalist. So that was a whole different world. But yeah, it was just years. I just had a lot of training, just going to church every night and watching, my cousin uncle play. And I just started, remembering what they did, and I just tried to do it. And eventually I just grew. And I used to record myself just rehearsing and playing, and I would study and listen, try to see what I could do better. So that's some of my beginnings. Yep.
Learning in a church is watching your cousin playing, hearing gospel, being in a family where your both parents are musicians, and how do you manage to found your sound, to found the music that you love, that you can relate to, that this is the music that I'm going to make the rest of my life. This is the music that I can connect mostly. But how much time or how much research of that amount of music means when your family is already musicians?
That's a good question. So I'm going to try to make this a short story and not get long-winded. So the church that I grew up in, it was really strict. They didn't want us to listen to secular music. Like anything outside of gospel was considered a no-no, because it was like, that's the devil's music, but that's a whole nother story. But anyway, I just remember, just always listening to artists like Rand Sallin, which he was my godfather. My dad was Rand's additional keyboard player, when his main one couldn't make it. And I also got a chance to work with Rand. But anyway, just, growing up with this strict foundation, all I can listen to was gospel. But when I would go to school, I would hear my friends talking about like other genres, like hip hop. I'm like, man, what is this hip hop? I wanted to find out about this other genre because I wanted to be cool. My friends, everybody was talking about it, and then eventually one of my older mentors, because I always hung around older people. One of my older mentors, he was a pianist at a church, but he also, he played jazz, and he put me on to Tony Williams live in New York. That was on VHS tape at the time, and I remember he gave me that, and I was like, oh man, this is crazy. It was jazz and seeing Tony Williams. And then I remember when I started taking chart reading lessons as a young teenager, when I would go check out, to pay for the lessons and get drumsticks, I would eventually get exposed to the magazine called Modern Drummer Magazine, and then all those instructional videotapes. And I remember the one tape that I had that my mom bought me, it was Terry Bozzio solo drums. And the reason why she got me that is because it didn't have any other instrumentation. It was just drums only. So she didn't feel like, it was like secular, what I'm saying? It was Terry Bozzio, playing drums. So when I got that really opened up my eyes. And then I snuck to check out other genres. And then when I got exposed to jazz, I wanted to find out what other drums were out there. And then I had another older mentor that I looked up to. He introduced me to the Buddy Richmond Memorial Series, which were these concert series where they would feature jazz drummers like Vinnie Colaiuta, who was one of my heroes, Dave Buckle, Steve Gadd, Dennis Chambers, Louis Belson, and Greg Bissonette. And I would just floor it. Like, I was like, man, this is a whole nother, genre style. And when I went to the drum shop, I got all those I bought all those instructional videotapes just to learn this other style of music. And then I was like, man, I remember seeing Steve Gadd, and I was really impressed with how Steve Gadd was genre bending drummer. Like, I found out that he was playing on some pop records, and I was like, man, this dude can play everything, and he didn't overplay. He serviced the music, and I knew as a young teenager that I wanted to be a genre-bending drummer. You know, I don't know how I was going to get there because of my strict church foundation background, but eventually that was my prayers, and I believe, by me staying faithful, I believe the Creator, you know, saw that and opportunities presented himself. And I remember, you know, playing in my first gospel jazz trio, which presented some opportunities. I got a chance to perform, you know, for stage plays, which were big at the time. And it was a specific one I performed at. One of the star actors was a gospel singer named Vanessa Bell Armstrong, and I think she also sung. And I got a chance to play in the band, and they had us set down in the pit. But you didn't see the band until everybody came up to take a bow. And then, you know, I was young, you know what I'm saying? I was young, and I remember, and at the same time, I remember meeting Chris Coleman, who, you know, was a little younger than me, but we were hearing about Chris because this stage play was in Saginaw, Michigan. And I remember the older guys, it was like, yo, this guy's going to be the next dude. And we were young, and that was true. Chris Coleman, you know, he grew up, and as you see, he's one of the best drummers in the world, and he's a good friend of mine that I grew up with. So, but yeah, just seeing Steve Gadd open and those jazz drummers opened me up to a whole different world. And then at the same time, I remember, you know, being exposed to hip hop. Then eventually I would get exposed to the Roots, Questlove, you know, and that was my first time seeing, you know, hip hop done with a live band. And I was like, oh, that's just so killing. So it was always my dream, you know, to do the same thing. And as time goes, my career progressed, I've been able to do that. And yeah, that's just some of the you know, some of the history on that.
Sorry if I get too personal, but in that moment when you discovered hip hop, start playing hip hop, and what about the surroundings that you came from? There was any problem? There was any finger pointing about what you were doing, and how you manage that? How you deal with that in a place or people that could be, no, that music is the devil's music, as you said, and in a moment that there was no internet, no social media, no nothing, and it was all about what you think, and that's it.
That's a great question. And you're right, there was definitely a lot of finger pointing because at the time, you know, I became a super heavy born again Christian. You know, that's, I grew up in that, and, you know, I want to live this clean lifestyle. But it was just like, man, I was really frustrated because I felt like it was something really special with hip hop music. And although the hip hop at the time was very controversial, you know, talking like NWA and a lot of those guys, what they talked about, it wasn't, I couldn't play that in front of my parents. I wouldn't even want them to know that I was listening to that stuff because it was, you know, they had a lot of profanity. Some things were degrading, you know, but for some reason I was able to tune out the lyrics, and I gravitated towards the production, you know, and then eventually I became a composer and I started producing myself. But I just tried to find a way to appreciate hip hop from the production side of things. And yeah, it was definitely some finger pointing and just a lot of judgmental things with myself. I was like, man, I don't want to, you know, stop listening to hip hop because I like this is a part of my culture, and it's something about the beat. You know, I like, you know, the loops and it's just something that was hip about it. So I had to figure out, you know, I had to figure my own ways to just appreciate it. And then it really forced me to start producing and making my own hip hop tracks. And basically what I would do is, you know, I started off with a drum machine, and I remember my mom putting me in organ reading lessons because she wanted me to, you know, learn how to play organ. And I remember going to the lesson, and my organ lesson teacher, he had this machine that made beats, and I'm like, yo, what's that? Because we were basically playing, you know, we were learning scales, and we needed like a metronome or something, you know, to keep us in time. And he brought that drum machine, and I begged my mom to give me one of those. So that's how I learned. That's my beginnings of composing. I started off on a drum machine, and then I remember getting a Roland R5, which was a huge it was like a popular drum machine at the time, and they had the Roland R5 and Roland R8, and I was so good at sequencing drums where I would get hired to play drum machine drums behind choirs. Like I would make my little money, and I would play, you know, like I'm playing drums on the drum machine, and you know, eventually, and then and one of my older mentors, you know, let me back up. I remember one of my friends gifted me one of the Casio. It was this Casio keyboard that had 4 sample pads, yellow sample pads on it, and I was just like, man, what is this? You can actually record and make sound. You can say something, and this pad will repeat what you're saying. So I eventually, just to make a long story short, you know, I started making, you know, cassette, you know, beat tapes, syncing up the drum machine, making patterns on there, and press and start on this Casio sampler, and I would make beats and put them on cassette. And then I was like, since my mom and my dad, they were both choir directors and they music directors, so my mom collected a lot of vinyl albums, which were all gospel. So I was like, man. At that time, a lot of the hip hop producers, they were sampling, you know, James Brown, Funkadelics, you know, Bernard Purdy, you know, they were sampling secular, you know, records. And I was like, well, if I want to continue to listen to hip hop and be on this born again Christian market, you know, journey, I started sampling gospel music. So I would take my mom's, you know, vinyl records and cassettes, and I would make gospel beat tapes. So that was my thing. And as you know, when we start doing something, we want to be like the people that have influenced us. And at that time, you know, I loved producer DJ Premier. He had a group called Gangstar. Pete Rock was a big producer, and it's crazy that I'm actually in Pete Rock's live band. And Dr. Dre, the RZA from Wu-Tang Clan, Q-Tip, man, the Bomb Squad, the list goes on. So I was making beats, trying to make beats like, you know, with that same aggression, but instead of using secular music, I was sampling gospel. So I still got my cassette tapes, you know, with those beat tapes. So that was my thing. And then eventually I knew that I was gonna have to get my own style, you know, because, you know, as you grow up, as you know, when you're young, you want to do everything that your heroes do. You know, if they playing a certain stick, you want to play that same stick. But I remember, and I'm kind of getting long-winded. I don't want to keep going. I know you got other questions, but yeah, I just started making gospel beat tapes, and then eventually, you know, I started making these projects. One of the projects and artists that I was working with was my sister Rena. We would just make these, you know, hip hop style, soul hop. That's what I call soul hop. This combination of hip hop and soul together. But we would make these like hardcore hip hop tracks with her vocals on it, and I had other artists like my cousin and different ones that I was like, I had this vision of making these, you know, gospel hip hop, you know, projects. I only went so far, but you know, I still have the same what's the word I'm looking for? Oh man.
It's kind of your own direction, the way you want to things to be made, and I just as a fan of music, mm-hmm. I think you should release those tracks with those beats with gospel music. I think the world need it. I think the world needs to hear that. I can even imagine that's how awesome is, and I hope someday you have your own label. Don't quote on me, but you should release those tracks. And you were talking about everything that the artist do to make it in their own way, just to thrive. And in what moment, because the artist makes his music, its own music in your own room, in your garage, just show it to your closest friends. When you realize that your music or what you are creating is is professional. It needs to take the next step to be with new musicians, to be in a band, to release music, to take it to the next level as a professional, as a musician who wants a career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm going to answer the question, but just to piggyback, I did eventually get some better equipment, and I had my older mentor. They all had studios, so he would show me how to use the S900, a Kai sampler, and just to fast forward, to make a long story short, I did take a lot of those beat tapes, and I was able to clean them up in the studio. And nowadays, even within almost the last decade, moving from those equipment pieces to now you being able to produce everything with a computer, I have released a lot of those projects, instrumentals, on my Bandcamp page. So if you go to my Bandcamp and my SoundCloud, there's Spirit Drums Part 1 through 4. There's Loopers projects, and there's a lot of those projects that have a lot of those gospel samples. So I was able to to do that and put it out in the world. And all of the Daru Arena projects, we do have that undertone, positivity, spiritual undertone. Not being a gimmick or saying, judging people or nothing like that. But the energy of what we make is it's all about edifying the community and putting out positive vibes. And that's that's something that I wanted, that I bring in any genre that I play in, regardless if whatever they're talking about, just on the energy, spiritual level. That's what I want people to feel, and I think it transitions when I'm on stage and off stage. But I remember eventually, one of my mentors, when they introduced me, to going into a recording studio, they showed me what the real gear was. So I'm graduating from the Casio to like the real sampler. I never worked the MPC, but we use Cakewalk, and I know to show my age when I say Cakewalk, but it was a program that people used back in the days, like Pro Tools. It was our Pro Tools, and but yeah, so when they heard the potential in my beats. They was like, man, these beats, they sound great. You just need the equipment. So once I got the equipment, that encouraged me. Like, I feel like I had something, and I kept going. And then eventually, as years go by, things change. And now they have these computer programs where you can do the same thing without having all that gear. You can do everything right on the computer. So I just, I would use that. And at the same time, being a drummer, like figuring out my lane. It was, I feel like my career has evolved. Like, I started church, and then I remember, learning about Steve Gadd and all those guys, and like seeing how they were genre bending. They can play different various styles, and that was my vision to do that. So I allowed myself to open up and check out other styles of music. So there's an evolution of me playing gospel, and then moving on to playing jazz. And there's a large career where I played fusion. You know what I'm saying? It was in church settings, also outside of church settings, and I was playing all those chops. My drum kit I had more drums. I had a lot more. The setup was a little bit different. And then I started learning about rock and roll drummers and Caribbean. I played in a calypso band, so I didn't limit myself. I knew I wanted to be a genre bending drummer, and by me doing that stage play, I'd never forget. One day, brought the band out at the end, introduced everybody, and the compliments that I got, it gave me the confidence to say, man, maybe I can do this drumming thing for real. But I grew up with my instrument. It was a part of my life. Like, I grew up with it. It started from 4, and it was just a blessing. I feel like the drums and production kept me out of a lot of trouble, because just looking around, seeing my peers and my friends, some of them, they got caught up in certain things, and some are not around, or they there's no judgments, because we human. We're not perfect. We all take certain roads, but I'm grateful that I had this outlet, because it really helped me to make it through life, and I stuck with it, and just being open to going to different communities, not just sticking with my immediate background, my church background. I stepped outside, you know what I'm saying? And it's been very helpful for my career. And did that answer the question?
my question was, when was the time that you realized that your music needs that change of new people hearing your music? Now I think I'm a musician that needs a career, that wants a career, and when did it happen, or how did it happen?
So the internet has been a great asset because, growing up, when I grew up at the time, it was harder. You had to pay we all had to pay dues, you know what I'm saying? But back when Vinny and Wecco, when they were my heroes, it was just a thing where you had to go to Berkeley. You had to go to all these different things just to be seen. You had to go to the NAMM show. It was like you had to be on tour. It was all these things because there was no social media around. So it was all, you had to really work from the ground up. And it was a lot of killing drummers, during that time. And I'm glad that I got a chance to see both sides. But once the internet came around, that was by me already being used to, paying my dues and working hard. And it got a little bit easier because basically what happened, I started going to the trade shows like NAMM. I would go to PASIC. I found out about these different things that you can go where you can whatever you're doing, you can get exposed to, the people that matter or the people that work for these companies that we play, the DWs and all these drum companies. And, that's really been a help. And then the internet, I just use the internet as a vehicle. And I remember, like I said, when I was a kid, I would record myself on cassette tape playing, just taking notes and seeing what I can do better. And then eventually I got a camera and I would get footage, and I got made fun of. People was like, man, why are you always recording yourself video? And I would record my rehearsals, but it paid off because I had all this content. I had all this content with me playing with various artists in different styles. So I was able to, my press kit was dope. So I could go to a NAMM show and go to the booth and say, hey, here's my press kit, and I had a video. They can watch the video and see. So
you've been generating content even many years before the content was generated, man.
Yes. So
ahead of time.
I got a bag full of those little videotapes that you put in the old school cameras. I would film everything. I would film, and then when YouTube came around, it was another something else that had where you can upload. I took advantage. I had the content already. You know what I'm saying? So all those people that poke fun at me, I was ahead of the game. So I was, the internet really was a vehicle. I used that, to showcase what I did. And then eventually by moving to different states and, just fast forwarding, being in New York, during the time, where, it was just the world that I had jumped in as far as the hip hop world at the time. And it was really, the Roots was really one of the only bands. It was other bands that had live instrumentation, but as far as the popular ones, when the Roots, it was not really too many people having a live, hip hop band. By me being a producer, I just made a name for myself. I did a couple cool things. I started drumming with a group called Slum Village, which is a group that Jay Dilla was in, rest in peace, and Talib Kweli. So the hip hop groups that I played in, they had a big name, so that really helped. And I made a good reputation for myself. I would get hired as sometimes not just the band member, we hired him as the music director, which means I would pick out the musicians and I would also, teach them music. I did the best job, and I always, tried to give the artists what they wanted and respect the original compositions. So I made a name for myself, and you know how it is. The word gets around, everybody want to hire you. I just came up at a good time. I had the content ready, and I just, try to make a good reputation for myself, and it worked out. It worked out.
you were even when YouTube came up, and Instagram and TikTok and Reels and all that stuff. It was just something natural to you to show it. It was nothing that now what I'm gonna do is here's my content, man.
Yo, when MySpace was out, I really took advantage of that. I networked my I was on MySpace for hours, and I'm sure other people were. I used to be on that platform for hours, and I remember when Facebook came around, I just feel like I seen what the vehicle was, and I tried to figure out how could I, use it to network. And every little thing, it was like, it was golden. It may not have been nothing it may have been really little. I remember back in the days, getting vinyl or getting the cassette tapes or CDs, and you look at the back and you would see the address. You'd be like, oh man, I want to send my demo. So I used to do that. I used to get to, read the address, and I was trying to get on. So I would make my beat tapes or whatever. I would send them out. And I always was, having content ready. So when the different formats came available, all I had to do was convert it over to whatever was needed. So I'm thankful because I got made fun of, and a lot of times I didn't have a much of a social life because I was just dedicated on the craft. I mean, I zoned out, and I'm just grateful that I stuck with it. It was not easy. It was not easy, especially growing up in a super strict church background, and people, they want you to do what they want you to do, or most people become like something in the church or whatever, and that's fine. But I just feel like that wasn't the end result of my journey, and I'm grateful. I stepped out on faith, and it's not for everybody, but I'm glad that I did, and I'm just grateful that I was able to reap the benefits. And I'm still grinding. I'm still excited about finding out who the next generation of artists out, and I'm still excited. I'm still grinding like I was, but I'm trying to work harder and work smarter, not harder, if that makes any sense. And there's levels to this. I'm an entrepreneur, so I have a label, and I also have products out. So I've definitely graduated to being a businessman now, so it's just another level that I'm on as far as moving away from just being a musician.
There are many steps, as you were mentioning, along of this conversation about being a musician, being in a place that playing different music can make points and changing genres along the way, and but you are a very open musician in the moment of if a door opens, and if we're playing drums or producing or doing the label kind of guy, doing the part of the industry, what door makes you more uncomfortable? What door makes you a more challenging for you, even as a producer, as a drummer, as a label owner, as a person who drives an entire band?
That's a good question. I would just say looking up to different people, not just drummers, but people that I became friends with, over the years. Another friend that I can mention, his name is Dame Dash, and Dame Dash, he managed Jay-Z for a while, and he's really helped, spearhead a lot of the different greats out there, from Kanye, like what he built, what I'm saying, and just being around him, the hustle, and just watching how he was able to just be independent. Seeing him do it independently and doing it on his own, and just when people tell just watching him until this day, it's very inspiring, and I'm grateful that I've been able to be around folks like him. Also, Jack, he's my boss. He's also my friend, but it's just cool to just see him, with Third Man. I remember I wasn't there from the beginning, but I was, there, during the growth of Third Man in Nashville, when I started playing with Black Milk. But just seeing somebody that I work with and how they be a businessman, you know, and become a franchise. That really helped it was a very, you know, it was inspiring. Like, if they can do it, I can do it too. So just learning how to play politics and I always tell people relationships are everything, you know, from all levels. Not like, it's not always like your spouse or your girlfriend. It's just people in general, like those relationships, how you build those bridges, and it can help you or it can hurt you. You know what I'm saying? So I'm all about not burning the bridges. I do realize that some things are seasonal. So sometimes you may be in bands or around people for a short season, and when it's your time, you got to grow to the next phase. It ain't nothing wrong with that. But as long as you know, keep those lines of communications cool. If you got to go back, you can go back, and everything is cool. But if you leave messy, if you leave on bad terms, then it might be harder for you to, you know, to rekindle that relationship. But yeah, just seeing those guys, and and let me take it back. I remember when they started really making drummers, like building a business. I mean, and like giving drummers signature sticks and doing instructional videotapes. I don't know what those deals were, but it was just really cool as a kid to see that happening and being like, man, one day I want to have my brand attached to something, and seeing that come true. It's a dream come true. You know, I had my own signature drum kit, you know, via PDP DW drums, and just seeing those guys like Wecco and the different ones that was able to take their brand and make a business out of it, you know. So I seen that early. That's why I always say I'm thankful that I came up during the time that I did, because I seen people doing it, you know what I'm saying? And back in the days, a lot of the people that inspired me musician wise, you couldn't touch them, you couldn't get close to them, you know. They were like, but the internet has really made things a lot easier for us just to DM, or, you know, when you at a concert, it's just made things a lot easier. But, you know, but yeah, I know I'm probably going off the question, but just that whole business mentality really, you know, when I started learning what really goes down when you in the studio and how to get points and get production and publishing, that really changed my life, because I'm like, at some point, I just knew that I wanted to be the drummer that played on records, classic records, but also get recognized, and also have some equity and input, you know, on the writing part, you know, which, you know, there's levels to this. So when you're paying dues, you may do a lot of freebies to get your name out there. But I just remember when I just started learning, and I would learn about these things when I would go to the NAMM and PASIC convention, because in those drum clinics, they would, you know, you would learn about, you know, writing and how you can get and make the best of being a musician, knowing that, you know, when you play on TV, you're supposed to get a check. You know, certain business things that you like, depending on how you came up, you may not have never known. But I feel like those conventions have been really helpful, just learning that we can really make money. And now, the way the world is right now, we need to learn how, you know, if we want to do this for real, we need to know how we can make some money. Well, we're gonna you know, have to do some other things, which I've done in my career. But I'm grateful that I've been able to be independent and be a businessman and maintain as a musician and entrepreneur. I'm thankful.
And being in a moment where you are influenced by all these artists or these drummers or all these people that in many ways can influence you, but you are in a part that you are influential now.
It's crazy.
It really is. It's been I don't know how many times or how many people reach for you for playing in their albums, in their singles, or produce them. What needs an artist, or what you see in or hear in an artist that can inspire you to produce them, to work with them?
That's a good question, and I'm grateful, you know, it's just surreal being on the opposite end, like growing up being that dude, to be like, man, I want to do that. And now, you know, and looking up to all my heroes, and now people consider me their heroes, it's very humbling. I would say I've been doing this for a long time, and I feel like my ear, you know, is I'm still learning, I'm still growing, and I can still learn, you know, how to take what I'm doing to the next level. But from where I'm at right now, for me to even entice working with an artist for certain things, I have to connect with them. Like the spirit, what they doing has to connect with, you know, the energy, you know what I'm saying? Because there's a lot of people out there that are good, but you can kind of see who's experience and, you know, who's just, you know, still learning, if that makes any sense. So I can kind of, you know, it don't take that much, and I'm a very intuitive and person that I vibe up the energy, and you can tell. It's like you have a group of musicians in one room, and when they play, you can tell by the first couple of notes or the first couple of things if they you know, if they do this or if they professional. It don't take that long. So I feel like that's where I'm at. I can tell by either meeting them in person and getting the vibe off of them, or nowadays through the internet, how they talk, and you know, or if I see something and I see the potential in it. And I hadn't always been in a position where I was able to pick and choose, but I'm grateful that I can do that nowadays, and I've been able to do that for some time now. Because there was one period where you're just trying to get money and you take whatever comes to you. Now I've been in that place, especially trying to, you know, survive in New York City at one time. I'm in Nashville now, but you know, you just whatever comes in, you just want to make the money just so you can pay your bills. But nowadays, you know, being able to pick and choose, you know, it's all those elements, just seeing how people move, because like, I'm just trying to, I had to be very careful what I attach my brand to, because nowadays it's not just me playing on the record. When I play on somebody's record, they're going to be able to use my name and likeness to get people to put their eyes on that track. So that's why I charge what I charge, because it comes with weight. And that's why I understand when Premier and other artists, producers, when they charge a certain rate, you be like, man, they too expensive. But you can't pay for having that cosign or having that name on your record. It's going to make people want to hear what you're doing. You know what I'm saying? So you get what you pay for. Not saying everybody is deserving, you know, of doing that, you know, but you know, you can do it. You can build yourself a brand. You can build your brand to where you have a certain service, and people they want your thing, you know. And I'm thankful that I've been able to do that, you know, and that allows me not to feel like I got to copy and do what anybody else is doing, because I feel like I would want people to hire me to do what I do and not bring me in a session to be like, hey, play that Tony Williams thing, play that Questlove thing. I want people to hire me and be like, yo, play that Daru thing, do what you do. And that's what Jack did. And I'm thankful, you know, as I continue to build that reputation. I think that's very important, depending on the type of musician that you want to be. Now, there's some people out there that just want to be the machine. That's cool. You know, it ain't. I'm not knocking it, but you know, for me, you know, and people, I just feel like when you have something to bring to the table, I think you're going to get a little bit more opportunities. You know, especially if you have a good attitude, which count.
And so it's all about the feel. I think in your case, I once heard Jack White talking about you and that you were the best drummer in this generation, and it's about the feel. And I think both you and Jack are playing like that. It's all about the feel. And just to finish, I won't take you much time. And I was thinking and imagine 10 drum kits, 10 for the greatest drummer of all time. And there's yours. You can tell that there's your kit. Why your kit is set in that way? Because in my investigation and searching and mind blowing, it's the set is very jazziest, but your kick is very rock. It's like John Bonham in a jazz kit. But it has its own personality that it's been developing through the years as I've been listening you, watching you, and now that I got the opportunity to see you live. Why do you have that kit? Why your drums are like that? Because in a first watch, it seems uncomfortable.
That's a great question. Yeah, so to make a long story short, it's just for me to have an identity. And I remember, when I got exposed to like the modern drumming magazines and other magazines, when you look at the cover, they would showcase the drummer's drum kit, and that was their identity. So I was like, man, I got to get my own thing. And I remember when I started becoming like the next hip hop upper echelon drummer, outside of Questlove, because there's other drummers out there too. That's that's on the level. But I remember when I started playing hip hop and seeing him in this position, being the first guy to play in the hip hop setting, and his drum kit, he just had a couple pieces. He just had the snare and the floor tom. And one of the biggest things in the hip hop community is having an identity. And like, if outside of drumming back in the days, if you sounded like somebody or if you looked like them, you had problems. Like you always almost in a fight. People they took their organic and they look serious. And I understand. So I remember, when I started playing hip hop, I realized that I didn't need all of those extra drums, when that I played in a fusion setting. So I downsized my kit, similar to how Questlove kit with just a snare floor tom. And I was like, oh man, how could I take this and change it just so my kit don't look like Questlove, because I didn't want any problems if we ever were in the same room. And I played traditional grip, which is the jazzier grip, the grip where you play where the stick is sideways. And if you look at the old school jazz drummers like Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich, and Philly Joe Jones, they all played with the drums tilted. Maybe not like mine, but they had the snare drum tilted sideways to match the drumstick. And I was like, man, what could I do to switch it up? And so I turned the snare where it looks like a hill and it's going frontwards. So, and then one day when I woke up, I was like, man, what would happen if I do the floor time? So really the original ideals for my drum kit were just for me to have an identity. And it wasn't no type of, it made me play better or anything. I had to figure out how to play it. And people could say gimmick or whatever it is. It was just me finding my identity, whatever you want to call it. I had to figure out how to do it. And Michael Jackson, he wore gloves. He wore the glitter jacket. That's the identity that he wanted to have. Prince wore the stiletto. So me as a drummer, I'm just trying to find an identity. So when people see, when they see the drum kit, they can associate that with me. So, and then eventually I had to learn how to play it. I sit really high. And then when I started working with Jack, we had to learn all of the various catalogs, the Dead Weather and White Stripes. Some of those records, they had a marching snare drum. They had other sounds that Jack wanted. And I was like, well, I need more drums. So I kept the integrity of the angles, but I just added and put the drums in different places. And then my last configuration for the tour, the Supply Chain Issues tour, basically it's like when you get a job, you get all the tools you need to get the job done. So we had to learn almost 100 songs, and the Jack's latest project that he put out, the first time that he used samples, for a record. So that required that I need to get sample pads, more than one. So I just wanted to make sure I had all the tools that I needed to play the music in case we played some songs from the new project or from the Raconteurs or the other solo. I just wanted to make sure I had everything. And then by me seeing rock drummers always had a big drum kit. So I want to shout out Bazio, Bonham, Mitch Mitchell. All those guys were definitely influential. Stuart Copeland, all those guys are influential to me. May have been like a little thing that I may have saw that they did, and I try to add it to what I do. But they were all influential. And I remember rock drummers always having big kits. So I said this time around on this tour, I want to have me a big rock kit. You know what I'm saying? So what gave me my identity was the placement. You know, I don't like doing things, as you can tell, you know, like your average person would do. So that's what they did. That's what the rock guys did. They would have like 2 or 3 kick drum pedals. They would have a lot of cymbals. They would have roto toms. They would have a whole kitchen sink. So I'm just following suit. I'm just following what I saw, and then bringing my own style, you know, my own vibe to give me an identity. Ain't nothing different. So I shout out Mike Portnoy and all those guys, and I'm grateful that they welcomed me to the community, because those, like you guys, y'all been doing rock forever. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just a little over 10 years in the game, but I'm grateful for the people that's really been doing it to welcome me and embrace me. You know, it's humbling. It's humbling. But yeah, to make a long story short, it was to have an identity.
And it just is. It looks different. It sounds different. It sounds the kick and the snare kick is just goes through the heart, not in the heart, through the heart. When I was at that show, it was shit. That drums, it's kicking ass. And I want to thank you, Daru. It's been a pleasure, an enormous pleasure to have you here and talk to you and know you about your sound, your music, your history, and as saying over and over, you are one of the drummers of this generation. And any last words to the podcast?
Man, I want to thank you, Eric. It's so much respect. I'm looking forward to seeing you again. Thanks so much for being patient and having me on your podcast, and much respect to you as a musician. You know what I'm saying? Because you're dope, and you out there, and I just wishing everybody a blessed 2023, and hopefully, you know, we can be more environmental and do things to help the planet. You know, because we only have one. And also learn how to treat one another, and use our musical instrument and what we have as a person to edify and build up the next generation. It's very important that we, as you know, I won't say OGs, but coming into OGism or whatever, if that's a word, but it's important that we show the next generation below us how to behave themselves, because people are lost, you know, and it's not sometimes they fault. It's just they don't have a lot of good examples. So it's very important that we, you know, show them how to be respectful and how to behave, even on the internet, you know, not leave negative comments on somebody's wall because you don't understand what they're doing. Like, you wouldn't say that in front of that person's face. So what gives you the courage just to say, be reckless and talk crazy like that because you don't understand? You know what I'm saying? Like, be open-minded, you know. I just want to wish everybody good vibes for 2023. I want to wish you and your family. I'm looking forward to crossing paths again. And let's keep it going. God bless.
Thank you, Daru Jones. Daru Jones abriendo el episodio 1 de la sexta temporada del podcast de Ruidosa Caracola. Daru Jones, the one and only Daru Jones, aquí en el podcast de Ruidosa Caracola. Estuvo maravilloso esto. Yo soy Eric Mujica. Los quiero a todos. Adiós.